The letter is dated April 3rd. I would like also to read to you what is stated in our letter, dated April 4th, meaning one day after Mrs. Kane sent her letter on behalf of the SG to myself. In response to Mrs. Kane's letter mentioned above, in which we emphasized our agreement to what was stated in Mrs. Kane's letter, we confirmed in a written form in our letter one day after that we agree to what she mentioned in her letter and our willingness to discuss the remaining logistical details concerning the work of the mission in Syria. Indeed, a short discussion session was held to look into those technical details, logistical details, in the afternoon of April 4th. However, after the beginning of this session between my delegation and Mrs. Kane's delegation, Mrs. Kane and her team suggested that the discussions be postponed to the next morning in order to hold a long morning session to complete all the terms of the modalities, thus allowing for investigation mission to go to Syria as soon as possible. We were surprised the next day by the request of Mrs. Kane to meet with us without mentioning the question of convening a discussion session on the remaining logistical details as agreed upon. Mrs. Kane handed us a letter dated April 5th, which contains details that contradict with all what is stated in her previous letter of April 3rd and to all what we had discussed the afternoon of April 4th. When we asked her about the reason for this discrepancy, she told us that the Secretary General has been notified of new information about the French and British allegations, although he was then in The Hague. It is surprising that the Secretary General had new information available to him in less than 24 hours on an incident allegedly occurred on December 23rd, 2012. December 23rd, 2012, meaning an incident allegedly occurred 4 months before the Syrian government submitted its request to investigate the incident that occurred in Khan al-Asal. They waited 4 months. The French and British governments waited 4 months before sharing with the SG while he was in The Hague, and hours after we made a deal with Mrs. Kane, other allegations related to other claims. The Syrian government and the Secretariat has exchanged many letters, and my government has sent so far 9 letters, 9 official letters, signed by either the Minister for Foreign Affairs or myself, upon instructions from my government. These 9 letters were in response to 8 letters that originated from the Secretariat. This exchange of letters is an evidence of the willingness and cooperation of the Syrian government towards the United Nations in order to stand on the truth behind the crime perpetrated in Khan al-Asal. The Syrian government insists that it is still awaiting the arrival of a team of experts to the site of Khan al-Asal to determine the accuracy of the information sent by the Syrian government to the Secretariat. And we are still awaiting the receipt of any other credible information about the other allegations. The Syrian government believes that the only way for the investigation mission to check the truth of what happened is through going to Syria and conducting investigations on the ground at the site of Khan al-Assal, and not towering capitals here and there. We are here to request once again the Secretary General to cooperate with us swiftly in order to fulfill our previous request to initiate an independent, genuine, technical investigation in Khan al-Assal. And we believe that the best way to reach a credible outcome through this mission can only be achieved through deploying without any delay the mission and the reported incident in Khan al-Assal. Before I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you another alarming news coming from the city of Saraqib in Idlib, in the northern western part of Syria next to the Turkish border. Yesterday, the armed terrorist groups in Saraqib, realizing the very serious breakthrough achieved by the Syrian army in that area, spread seemingly the contents of plastic bags containing most probably a kind of powder which might be most probably a kind of chemical materials, spread these chemical materials amongst the crowds in Saraqib. Many people were affected by this heinous, irresponsible act, and the wounded as well as the victims had manifested signs similar to those during the use of chemical weapons. And as part of the prearranged arrangements, prearranged scenario, the victims were transported into Turkey to be treated in Turkish hospitals. And then, of course, I am quite sure that today or tomorrow you will hear again that the Turkish government has new tools indicating that the Syrian government used chemical weapons against its own people, as we say, in Saraqib. The point is that after failing in presenting any corroborated facts with regard all the other allegations, it seems now that some intelligence here and there among the capitals that are directly involved in the bloodshed of the Syrian people are looking to a new strategy, which is to set up any kind of tools or proofs that would implicate or involve the Syrian government on false basis with regard to the use of chemical weapons. So rather than answering swiftly the Syrian official request to investigate the use of chemical weapons in Khan al-Assal, we have been waiting for 40 days, giving enough time to all those who are trying to manipulate the scene so that they would find out another deviation from the initial path, which is Khan al-Assal, to focus on something else, somewhere else. A, to undermine any chances of success of the Syrian request to investigate. B, to deviate the attention from the serious crime perpetrated in Khan al-Assal and to shift the attention of the public opinion towards invisible areas arranged, created by some intelligence services. I'm in your hands.
Thank you very much. My name is Hashim Al-Arabi in this channel, sir. And on behalf of... it's not working? Okay. My name is Talal Haj from Al-Arabiya News Channel, and on behalf of the Executive Committee of United Nations Correspondents Association, we thank you for this briefing at this very important juncture. I have two questions. One in details. The letter of Angela Kane on the 3rd of April, did it mention that the United Nations Secretary General was assessing, continuing to assess the two requests of the British and the French while agreeing to your government request? And could you make that letter available to the press for us, copies of that letter, if it's possible?
All the correspondence.
To correspondents of the United Nations?
I don't have anything to hide.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you.
No, hold on. We are diplomats and we are still negotiating with the Secretariat the final formalities for achieving and fulfilling this mission of investigation. So you may understand that being diplomat requires to be more cautious than somebody else. But however, you all have cameras, and I will show you again the letter. This way.
My question, sir.
Don't you have cameras here this way?
We do. Yeah. My question, sir, does she say in the letter...
It's 2 pages.
My question, sir, does the... Ms. Angela Kane, does she state that the Secretary General is continuing to assess the two requests from the British and the French government and awaiting their details? Because he asked them for more details before he accepted their request to investigate another 2 positions or 2 places in Syria. And a more wider question is, you know, and we all know, that the Secretary General cannot ignore a request from the British and the government, or any government, to investigate an incident that threatened peace and security. Now, he asked for more details, and he got more details, and in his judgment, he found that these details warrants an investigation. The question is, which many people ask and argue, is why doesn't Syria accept, especially that they dropped Al-Utaiba request to investigate? They are just insisting on Homs and Khan al-Assal. Why doesn't the Syrian government, what people argue, has nothing to hide, accept that they investigate these 2 places and put the matter to rest? If the Syrian government has nothing to hide, why doesn't it accept the entry of the inspectors and for all to see, the whole world to see, and put the matter to rest? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I do not interfere in the competences of the Secretary General. Our point of view is that from the beginning, it wasn't us who asked for the investigation. It wasn't France, it wasn't Britain, it wasn't Qatar. It was the Syrian government responsible for the safety and well-being of its own people that requested the investigation. We were asked by the Secretary General to provide answers to 18 technical questions later on, to which we answered. The government answered 18 technical questions related to technicalities, not logisticals, technicalities relevant to the incident. Important scientific questions related to what happened in Khan al-Asal. My government answered these 18 questions in a matter of 24 hours. And then we replied to the SG with the answers. Among these questions were one question asking whether the Syrian government has samples, blood samples, footages of the incident, testimonies by the wounded, suffocated people, etc., etc. Reports, medical reports of the doctors who treated the wounded and the victims in the hospitals, etc., etc., etc. So all these questions were answered swiftly and promptly by the Syrian competent authorities.